For more than half a century, Mick Fleetwood was the keeper of Fleetwood Mac's deepest secrets. The drummer who held the band together on stage stayed silent off it, about the affairs that shattered friendships, the addictions that drained fortunes, and the betrayals that cut deepest of all. Until now. At 78, Mick is finally talking. The cocaine spiral that cost him nearly $60 million. The moment Stevie Nicks drew a hard line and banned someone from the studio. And then, in March 2025, something happened that stunned even longtime fans. Mick Fleetwood and Lindsey Buckingham were back in the studio together. But this wasn't just about music, it was about truth, what really tore Fleetwood Mac apart, and why some wounds may never fully heal. Mick Fleetwood was born on June 24, 1947 in Redruth, Cornwall, into a life shaped by movement and discipline. His father was a Royal Air Force wing commander, and in the years after World War II, the family was constantly relocating. By the time Mick was 4, they were living in Egypt, where he spent 6 formative years amid the upheaval of the 1952 Egyptian Revolution and the Suez Crisis. Immersed in a culture far from England, he absorbed unfamiliar rhythms and sounds, especially percussion, long before he ever sat behind a drum kit. The family later moved to Norway when Mick was around 10. There he learned the language, adapted to long winters, and developed a sensitivity to mood and atmosphere that would later shape his musical style. But school was difficult. Mick struggled with severe dyslexia, leaving him frustrated and misunderstood despite his obvious creativity. Music became his escape. At 13, his parents gave him a small drum kit, and everything clicked. He taught himself by playing along to records in the attic, developing an instinctive, untrained style that felt natural rather than learned. Creativity ran through his family, and Mick leaned into it fully. As a child, he even built a makeshift nightclub in a barn behind his house, complete with lights and a stage, an early sign that he understood music as an experience, not just sound. At 15, miserable at school and failing academically, he dropped out with his family's support. They believed in him, bought him a better drum kit, and sent him to London. There, Mick slept on his sister's floor in Notting Hill and hustled for work. He even bought a second-hand taxi to haul his drums, making himself indispensable. At 16, he landed a gig with Peter Barden's band, the Cheneys. Almost overnight, he was opening for the Rolling Stones and the Yardbirds and appearing in the 1965 short film Mods and Rockers. Before he turned 18, Mick Fleetwood had already stepped into the world of rock. After that, Mick joined the Bow Street Runners in 1966, a band that was still riding the wave of an early breakthrough. 2 years earlier, they had won a televised competition called Ready, Steady, Win, aimed at finding the next Beatles, earning a recording contract, prize money, and a hit single that sold over 20,000 copies. When Mick came aboard, expectations were high, but bad timing killed their momentum. A strike at the record-pressing plant delayed their promising follow-up release, and the band's buzz quietly fizzled out. For Mick, though, the real turning point came in April 1967 when he auditioned for John Mayall and the Blues Breakers, the epicenter of Britain's blues scene. Nervous but determined, he landed the job and began playing alongside elite musicians, including bassist John McVie. The two bonded quickly. Still, Mick's struggles with alcohol caught up with him, and he was eventually fired for showing up to gigs intoxicated. Even so, that stint proved invaluable. Mayall's band functioned like a blues university, immersing Mick in the traditions of Muddy Waters, John Lee Hooker, and Chicago blues. Losing the job didn't end his path. It redirected it. That same year, a small moment quietly changed music history. Peter Green was given free studio time by Mayall and used it to record a handful of tracks with Mick Fleetwood and John McVie. One instrumental was casually titled Fleetwood Mac. That name stuck. By July 1967, Green had formed a new band under that name, hoping it would lure McVie away from Mayall. After a brief hesitation and a temporary bassist, McVie finally joined. Fleetwood Mac made their live debut in August 1967 and released their first album in early 1968. Without a hit single or heavy promotion, it climbed to number 4 on the UK charts and stayed there for months, driven purely by word of mouth and raw live performances. By the end of 1968, new additions like Danny Kirwan and Christine Perfect were already reshaping the band. Later that year, Fleetwood Mac released Albatross, a serene instrumental that became their first #1 hit across Europe. With Peter Green and Danny Kirwan trading lead guitar lines, the song marked a creative high point. Green later admitted the track wouldn't have worked without Kirwan's touch. In August 1968, the band followed up with their second album, Mr. Wonderful, recorded live in the studio using real amps and a PA system to capture a raw, on-stage feel. Christine Perfect contributed keyboards, even though she still wasn't an official member. While the album leaned heavily on blues, it hinted at a band starting to stretch beyond its roots. The Beatles even took notice and considered signing Fleetwood Mac to Apple Records, but their manager declined. Instead, the group signed with Warner Brothers' Reprise label, beginning a long-term partnership after a brief and unstable period of label hopping. By September 1969, Fleetwood Mac took a bold leap forward with Then Play On, an album that blended blues with psychedelic rock. The shift paid off. The record reached number 4 in the UK, while the single Oh Well climbed to number 2. Kirwan and Green now stood side by side creatively, helping define a more expansive sound. Around the same time, the band traveled to Chicago to record with blues legends at Chess Records, further grounding their evolution in tradition while pushing ahead. Then came the breaking point. In March 1970, while touring Europe, Peter Green attended a party in Munich where he took a powerful dose of LSD. He returned profoundly changed, growing increasingly troubled by money and fame, and even talking about giving away the band's earnings. Within weeks, he left Fleetwood Mac. Later diagnosed with schizophrenia, Green underwent treatment, leaving behind a band that had just begun to reach its full potential. Amid the uncertainty, Christine McVie stepped fully into the picture. In August 1970, just days before a U.S. tour, she officially joined the band. Though she had briefly retired from music after marrying John McVie, she had already contributed to several Fleetwood Mac recordings. On Kiln House, released that September, she added vocals, keyboards, and even the album artwork. Christine's arrival marked a quiet turning point. Her melodic sensibility helped stabilize the group and guide them toward a more accessible sound. Years later, she would recall how simply it happened. Someone asked if she wanted to join, and that was it. Fleetwood Mac, once again, had found its next chapter. In February 1971, Fleetwood Mac was shaken by another surreal loss. Jeremy Spencer left his Los Angeles hotel one afternoon, saying he was going to a bookstore. He never returned. With a show scheduled at the Whiskey A Go Go, the band panicked. After 5 days, the FBI located him. He had joined the religious group Children of God. When Mick Fleetwood finally saw him again, Spencer had shaved his head, taken a new name, and spoken eerie, repetitive phrases about faith. Spencer later said he had felt adrift and was drawn in by a street musician. The group he joined would later be exposed as deeply abusive. Spencer was gone for good. Bob Welch stepped in to fill the gap. Despite losing yet another founding member, the band pressed forward. In September 1971, they released Future Games, an album that marked a clean break from blues. The sound was softer, more melodic, built around harmonies and atmosphere. It failed to chart in the UK, but began to find a foothold in the US, with songs like Dragonfly hinting at a new direction. That same year, a greatest hits album was released in Europe, quietly closing the book on the band's early era. In 1972, Fleetwood Mac followed with Bare Trees, featuring Welch's Sentimental Lady and Christine McVie's Spare Me a Little of Your Love. Both became fan favorites and helped solidify the band's evolving identity. Future games, once overlooked, would later go gold in the U.S., confirming its long-term impact. But the changes came at a cost. Danny Kirwan, who had joined the band as a teenager, was unraveling under pressure. By 1972, he was drinking heavily, isolating himself, and struggling to cope. During a tour, he smashed his guitar and refused to go on stage. The band had no choice but to let him go. It was a painful ending. Kirwan later crossed paths with Welch and, half-joking, warned him, "You're going to need luck." With Kirwan's departure, the last piece of Fleetwood Mac's original core was gone. The turmoil continued into 1974. Guitarist Bob Weston was dismissed after an affair with Mick Fleetwood's wife, Jenny Boyd, a betrayal that cut deep, especially as Fleetwood himself was spiraling. That same year, the band released Heroes Are Hard to Find, which became their highest-charting album yet in the U.S. But success on paper didn't translate on the road. Shows were half full, tensions flared, and during a Las Vegas performance, Bob Welch openly argued with John McVie on stage. When the tour ended, Welch walked away. Fleetwood Mac was once again on the brink, uncertain if it could survive another collapse. When Fleetwood Mac released their self-titled album in 1975, no one expected it to become a phenomenon. The record climbed slowly, painfully slowly, taking 58 weeks to reach #1 on the Billboard 200. But when it finally topped the chart on September 4, 1976, it changed everything. The album went on to sell more than 9 million copies in the U.S. and over 7 million worldwide, even as the UK initially ignored it, where it peaked at just number 23. That slow burn, however, laid the groundwork for their greatest and most chaotic era. By the time the band entered the studio to record Rumors in 1976, their personal lives were in ruins. Cocaine use was constant. Mick Fleetwood was reeling from his wife's affair with a close friend. Christine and John McVie were divorcing. Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham had just split, but were forced to work side by side, turning the studio into a battleground that only fell silent when the tape rolled. Despite, or because of, that tension, the music cut deep. Songs like Go Your Own Way and Don't Stop became emotional confessions set to melody. Released in early 1977, Rumors exploded. It sold over 10 million copies in its first month, eventually surpassing 40 million worldwide. The album ruled the charts for 31 weeks, produced 4 top 10 hits, including Dreams, which reached #1, and won Album of the Year at the 1978 Grammys. It became one of the most successful albums in history. The follow-up, Tusk, 1979, went in the opposite direction. Experimental, risky, and expensive. Costing $1.4 million to make, it pushed boundaries with unconventional recording methods and raw, unpredictable performances. While critically respected, it never matched Rumors commercially and left the band exhausted and fractured. In 1982, Mirage brought a brief return to softer sounds and commercial success, debuting at #1. But the stability was an illusion. The tour was short, tensions lingered, and Lindsey Buckingham felt increasingly disconnected. When the tour ended, he walked away, beginning another cycle of departures, turmoil, and uncertainty for Fleetwood Mac. Mick Fleetwood's most damaging mistake came in the early 1980s, when he bought a 1,000-acre farm in Australia for $3 million. The property included multiple houses and even a fishing lake, but he lived there for barely 3 weeks before realizing the lifestyle wasn't for him. He had taken a $2 million advance to finance the purchase, then borrowed another $2 million when the money ran out. By the time he tried to sell, the property's value had dropped below the mortgage. Combined with declining band income, the loss pushed Fleetwood into bankruptcy in 1984, costing him nearly everything, including his green card. Fleetwood Mac rebounded musically in 1987 with Tango in the Night, powered by hits like Little Lies. But just before the tour, Lindsey Buckingham abruptly quit during a tense meeting at Christine McVie's house. The split turned heated, and the band was forced to move forward without him, bringing in Billy Burnett and Rick Vito as replacements. Fans quickly accepted the change, and the tour went on. In 1990, the band released Behind the Mask with a new lineup. While it struggled in the U.S., it debuted at #1 in the UK and went platinum. After the tour, both Stevie Nicks and Rick Vito left. That same year, Fleetwood Mac was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, though Bob Welch, who had guided the band through the early 70s, was controversially excluded. The mid-1990s marked another low point. The 1995 album Time, recorded without Nicks and featuring new members Becca Bramlett and Dave Mason, failed commercially and was plagued by internal conflict. Fleetwood later called the lineup one of his biggest regrets, and the band quietly unraveled again. Hope returned in 1997 when the classic Rumors-era lineup reunited for MTV's The Dance. The live album debuted at #1, sold over 1 million copies within 2 months, and became one of the best-selling live albums in U.S. history. It was a triumphant return, but also a farewell. Christine McVie left the band the following year. Fleetwood Mac's final chapter came in 2003 with Say You Will, their last studio album. Though McVie was no longer a full member, she appeared on a few tracks. The album debuted at #3 on the Billboard 200 and went gold, marking the band's strongest showing in decades. For the first time in 15 years, Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham fully collaborated in the studio again. After the peak years, Mick Fleetwood slowly found his way back to the blues. In 2008, he formed the Mick Fleetwood Blues Band with guitarist Rick Vito, and their album Blue Again earned a Grammy nomination. It was a return to the raw sound that launched his career, far removed from stadium pop and fame. In 2014, Fleetwood became deeply reflective in his memoir, Play On, revealing he had lost nearly $60 million to cocaine addiction and filed for bankruptcy in the 1980s. Recovery pushed him to rebuild his life beyond music. He launched a successful wine label, explored photography, and in 2012 opened Fleetwood's on Front Street in Maui, a childhood dream turned reality. That chapter ended in tragedy in 2023, when wildfires destroyed Lahaina and the restaurant, prompting Fleetwood to return immediately to help displaced staff. Music remained his emotional anchor. In 2024, he released Blues Experience with Jake Shimabukuro, honoring Christine McVie after her death in 2022. Their delicate tribute to Songbird stood as a quiet farewell. Fleetwood's personal life mirrored the chaos of the band's history, marked by multiple marriages and complicated relationships, including a brief affair with Stevie Nicks that never fully severed their creative bond. Now in his late 70s, he lives more quietly between Maui and Los Angeles, focused on family and reflection. Then in March 2025, something unexpected happened. Lindsey Buckingham joined Fleetwood in the studio for the first time since 2018, contributing to Fleetwood's upcoming solo album, a moment that suggested some old wounds at last might not be beyond repair.